Okay, good morning. I'm going to get started by just welcoming all of you. Welcome to Wat Tung Yu. Nice to see everyone here. Nice to see everyone online as well. Welcome to our class today. This is our group learning program where each Sunday I get together with students and I help them understand the path to enlightenment. We're using this book as our foundational text. It's titled Developing a Life Practice, The Path That Leads to Enlightenment. And each Sunday I go chapter by chapter, helping students to be able to understand the path to enlightenment. This is a 7-month program where you can gradually learn here at the temple, or you can also join by live stream as you guys travel around. Today we're studying chapter 7, which is titled The Five Precepts, a householder's guide to daily practice. If you've heard that the Buddha taught no killing, no stealing, no sexual misconduct, no lying, and no intoxicants, this isn't actually what the Buddha taught. This sounds like a bunch of rules and commandments. It sounds like black and white. This isn't what the five precepts are. I'm going to be using the original words of the Buddha to be able to help you guys see what he actually taught on these five impactful decisions, because you can make these decisions wisely and then you will experience wholesome results or wholesome Kamma, or you can make these decisions unwisely and you'll be experiencing unwholesome Kamma or unwholesome results. So by understanding what the Buddha is teaching on this particular topic, you'll be able to awaken to the wisdom of the natural law of Kamma more related to these particular decisions that you make. So I'm going to dive into that after we do our meditation. We start with meditation each class, so I'll guide you guys in a meditation session, and then afterwards we'll move into this topic of the five precepts, helping you guys to understand this, and then you'll be able to ask questions and get help, and we'll have an interactive class. If you'd like to join for meditation, the way that I start is with chanting. If you'd like to chant along, we have chanting sheets over there on the table. You're welcome to get one. There's the Pali language in there, and then you'll see the English translation of these chants. And as I'm chanting, you're welcome to chant along if you like. If you read the English translations, you're going to see a lot of admiration and respect and gratitude for the Buddha. And this is because students during his lifetime most likely created these chants, or maybe after his lifetime they might have created these chants, because the Buddha helps students to get to this enlightened mental state where the mind's completely peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy. By the time you get to enlightenment, you no longer experience any discontent feelings. All the anger, the sadness, the frustration, irritation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, stress, anxiety, loneliness, boredom, shyness, resentment, jealousy, all these feelings and others are completely eliminated from the enlightened mind. And if you learn from a teacher of how to accomplish that, and this teacher didn't want anything from you, or didn't expect anything from you, you'd probably have a lot of respect and gratitude for that person too. So I think that these chants were actually created by his students either during his life or after his death, because a Buddha doesn't walk around, an enlightened being doesn't walk around being arrogant and prideful and boastful and wanting people to chant these things to him. So he wouldn't have created these and say, here, chant these out of respect for me. But instead, I think that his students probably created them either during his life or after his death. So I use these as a way to ease the mind into meditation and get more benefit out of the meditation itself. And it's important to understand that these aren't a rite or ritual or a ceremony or worship. It's not prayer or anything like that. The Buddha never taught any of those kinds of things. He taught you to cultivate wisdom and to train the mind. During his lifetime, they used chanting as a way to commit the teachings to memory, that everything that he taught was oral. So every 2 weeks, they would come together and they would recite his teachings orally in order to commit them to their memory. And this is how they remembered the teachings. So this is where you can see there's nothing mystical or magical about chanting. It's not prayer or worship or anything like that. Today, we don't need to chant in order to remember the teachings, because we have books and audiobooks and videos and podcasts and all these kinds of things. But I still chant in order to help get more benefit out of the meditation itself. So if you'd like to join along in the chanting, you're welcome to. There are courses and things that I teach where I teach students how to actually chant. But today what we're going to do is just chant and kind of go into the meditation. Whereas if you'd like to take other programs that I share where it includes learning how to chant, you can surely do that. So after the chanting and we ease into the meditation, you're going to hear me come in with guidance. I'm going to be guiding you guys in the meditation for a brief period of time. But then there's going to be a period of time where it's just quiet. And we're just all meditating together here at the temple, and anyone who's joining us online will just all be meditating. Then we'll come out of that with some more chanting, and that's where we'll start today's class. As we're meditating, you're going to surely hear different sounds in the environment because you can't be in an environment where it's permanently quiet. You're going to hear different cars or maybe birds chirping or dogs barking or any number of things that you might hear. But all of these things are impermanent. And as long as your mind isn't craving permanence where you want it to be quiet, then you won't be annoyed. So when you're hearing different sounds or your mind's moving off the breath, as you guys will hear, you can just bring your mind back to the breath and train your mind to let go and not crave permanent silence. So for those of you guys that are maybe starting out with your meditation journey or you haven't really meditated very much, I'll give you guys some guidance to help you with seated meditation because there's actually 4 different positions for the body to be in. There's seated, lying, standing, and walking. And you would learn these different positions at different times in your journey to enlightenment. And you would need these at different times because your body can't permanently be in one specific position. So I'm going to give you some guidance on how you can sit to find a more comfortable position, but just understand what I share with you. It's going to be unique for you, that there isn't just one fixed way to sit during meditation. It's up to you. You find what's comfortable. So what I'm sharing with you is just guidance to maybe give you some options that you can maybe find something that's going to be comfortable for you. So if you're on the floor, you usually have some cushions under your rear. This helps to create a more soft seat. And then you would like to just lightly cross your legs. If you have your legs real tight, this can impede the circulation and make it challenging for you to meditate because you'll feel pain in the lower body. So if you just have your legs lightly crossed, this usually works out best. Then some people like to put their legs off the mat. This kind of gets the hips up in the air and it lessens the angle at the hips, the knees, and the ankles. And this will help you to meditate as well because you won't feel pain in the lower body. The Buddha put his right hand over his left with his thumbs together, and he put this into his lap. If you find this to be comfortable, you could use this. But again, it's not about everyone doing it exactly the same way. You need to find what's comfortable for you. Some people like to put their palms on their thighs or their knees. Some people put their palms up. Some people rest their hands comfortably in their lap. So you can do whatever's comfortable for you. And these are just some different options that you might consider. For some people, you might be sitting in a chair or on a sofa or a bench, or maybe you're in a wheelchair or something like this. And in these situations, once again, you can just find whatever's comfortable for you. But I'll give you a little bit of guidance of things that you might consider. Sometimes people like to put their feet flat on the floor or lightly cross at the ankles. But you can see I'm sitting in a chair with my legs crossed. So this is an option for you as well. And then for your hands and arms, you can also put those wherever you like if you're sitting in a chair. The upper body is helpful if it's erect, with the sternum up and the shoulders back. This will keep the mind attentive and alert during the meditation because this is a dedicated, active, purposeful training session where you're eliminating certain unwholesome qualities from the mind and you're cultivating certain wholesome qualities in the mind. So you'd like your mind to be attentive and alert during the meditation. Whereas if you were slouched with the upper body, the mind could be dull or lethargic. But if you're real rigid, the mind could be overactive or uptight. So you're not interested in either of those things. So you'd like the upper body to be in the middle with the sternum up and the shoulders back. And this will help keep the mind attentive and alert, as well as make it easy for you to breathe in through the nose and out through the nose so you can expand your lungs nice. So as I mentioned, I'm going to ease into meditation with some chanting, which you guys are welcome to join in on, and then I'm going to come back in with some guidance during our meditation. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Mahakava Bhutang Mahakavanang Apivateyami Savakato Mahakavata Tammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipano Mahakavato Savaka Sangho Sanghang Namami Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahato สัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะอิติปิโสมหะคะวะอะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธวิชาจารณังสัมมุโนสกขาโตโรกาวิตูอนุเตโรปุริสาดามาสติสัตตาตาวามนุสนังโพโตภาควาติ Okay, with the lower body and hands and arms comfortable, in the upper body erect, just close the eyes and start breathing in through the nose and out through the nose. Here you're just looking to establish the breath, a nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. Not forced or controlled, just a gradual inhale through the nose, experiencing the full breath. And then whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. Your breath may not match up with the guidance that I'm providing, and that's okay. This is your practice. I'm just here for guidance. You can use this voice as a reminder that whenever you get to the next inhale, breathe in naturally through the nose, developing a nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. And then whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose, experiencing the full breath. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the breath well established, start fixating the mind on the breath, either the sound of the breath coming into the nose or the sensation of air moving over the skin into the nose. The breath is the present moment. Fixate the mind on the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the mind fixated on the breath, Whenever you notice that it moves off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. No need to observe the thought, label it, judge it, analyze it, or even try to figure out where it's coming from. Whenever you notice that the mind is moved off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. I'm going to be quiet now and let you do this work of focusing on the breath, cutting off and letting go anytime the mind moves off the breath. You have nowhere to go. There's nothing to do. No one needs you right now. This is your time to focus on the breath. Breathing in and out. อะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธมหาเขวาพุทธังมหาเขวันนังอภิวาเทมิสวากขาโตมหาเขวตาธัมโมธัมมังนามัสสามิสุปฏิปันโนมหาเขวโตสาวกสังโฆสังฆังนามามินับโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนับโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนับโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะอิติปิโสมหาเขวาอะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธวิชาจารณังสัมมุโนสัคขะโตโรกาวิตุอนุเตโรปุริสาธัมมาสติสัตตาตาวามนุสนังโหโตภะคะวะติ Okay, if you guys would like to slowly make your way out of meditation. Once again, welcome to everyone. Nice to see all of you guys this morning. Welcome to everyone who's joined us since we started meditating, and welcome to everyone online as well. Nice to see everyone here this morning to learn the teachings of the Buddha. For those of you guys that maybe it's your first time here at the temple, I'll share a few things with you to help you feel even more comfortable here. We have some bathrooms in the back of the room, the very last two doors in the back. You're welcome to use those at any time. Feel free to get up and use the restrooms. We have restrooms outside the classroom too. If you go outside to the parking lot, you're going to see signs that'll take you around to the main bathrooms of the temple. You're welcome to use those as well. We even have a snack area over here that is provided by our students. We have fresh water and other drinks and snacks and things like that. Feel free to help yourself to anything over there at any time during the day. Feel free to help yourself to that. So as I was mentioning, today's topic is the Five Precepts, a householder's guide to daily practice. This is chapter 7 of our book, Developing a Life Practice, the Path That Leads to Enlightenment. This is a teaching that's going to help you to be able to make decisions in a wise way that's going to produce wholesome results. There's various teachings of the Buddha that you would need to be able to learn and be able to make your way to enlightenment. And the Five Precepts is one of those teachings, but the core central teaching of the Buddha is called the Eightfold Path. I taught this 2 weeks ago in this particular program, and then coming up this week when we have our course from Monday through Friday, I'm going to be teaching it on Tuesday. So you're going to be able to learn the Eightfold Path inside and out, either in our courses here, or if you'd like to watch any of the recordings or read the books or audiobooks or podcasts, you can learn this teaching. And I teach it based on the original words of the Buddha, because the Eightfold Path is the core central teaching that you need in order to be able to move your mind to enlightenment. And what enlightenment is a mental state where your mind has been trained to get to the point where you no longer experience any discontent feelings. Not only will you not experience anger, sadness, frustration, irritation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, stress, anxiety, loneliness, boredom, shyness, resentment, jealousy, all these discontent feelings. But you also will experience focus, concentration, clarity, and deep memory because the mind will be performing optimally. You'll notice that your personal, professional relationships are really blossoming. You won't have bitterness and harshness and hostility in your relationships any longer. You'll get to the point where you're not even in a bad mood any longer, that you'll never experience a bad mood. And you do this through uprooting certain pollutions that are in the mind that the Buddha discovered. He has certain tools and techniques that he's sharing with you in order to help you train your mind and get to the point where your mind's no longer experiencing any of these complications and struggles that one experiences in the unenlightened state. And one of the things that you need to be able to learn is certain moral conduct. And that's what the 5 precepts are. It's a moral conduct that's helping you to be able to understand how to make decisions based on the natural laws. It's the Eightfold Path that's going to explain to you this moral conduct in a wise way, in a way that you can fully understand. But this teaching of the 5 precepts really plugs into the Eightfold Path to be able to help you more fully understand what the Buddha is teaching you about moral conduct. Because once you establish right view, which right view is understanding the Four Noble Truths, where you understand the problem in your mind, the cause of this problem, the elimination of it, and the path forward, this is where the Buddha helps you to understand that it's craving, desire, attachment, longing, and yearning. This is what's causing your mind to be angry and sad and frustrated and have guilt and shame and fear and all these other discontent feelings. It's not the outside world. It's not other people who's causing you to be angry or frustrated or agitated or annoyed. It's actually being caused by your own mind. This is why you can actually solve this. Because if it was everybody else who was causing you to be angry and frustrated, you would never be able to get to peace and you'd never be able to get to joy. But if you can learn the Four Noble Truths and establish right view, understanding that it's your own mind that's causing these feelings, then you can understand that it's possible for you to actually eliminate these from your mind. That's how you actually train your mind to get to enlightenment, is by eliminating this longing, yearning, this forming your inner feelings based on some condition. Whereas if it's sunny outside, you might get happy or excited. But then when it's raining, you might get sad or frustrated. Or if your bank account balance is up here, you might get happy or excited. But when it goes down here, you might get angry or frustrated or annoyed. This is the mind causing these feelings itself. It's not the outside world. So as you establish right view and you start to understand that it's your own mind that's causing these feelings, then you can see like the bitterness and harshness and hostility that you might have at different times when you're unskillful in your moral conduct. This is coming from your own mind. You might feel in some situations that you're justified in the way that you treat other people, but this is only causing harm in your life. It's causing harm to others. It's causing harm in your relationships. And when you purify your moral conduct and you start treating people with politeness, kindness, friendliness, and respect in all situations, you're going to see more and more of that coming back to you. But as long as you're being bitter and harsh and hostile in your relationships, this is all going to come back to you. So what the Buddha teaches you once you learn the right view and the Four Noble Truths, and that it's your own mind that's causing these feelings, he moves right into moral conduct to help you understand how to shut down these unwise and unskillful decisions that one might make related to how they interact with other people. It's kind of like a pipe that is bursted and it's spewing oil all over the place. The first thing you're going to do is try to shut down the pipe so that you don't get this oil continuing to spew all over the world and causing difficulties in the world. And that's what's happening when an individual is being bitter and harsh and hostile in the world. It's like spewing oil into the world. And you would like to shut that down, because if you're going to clean up the condition of your mind and your life, you're going to need to learn how to be polite, kind, friendly, and respectful in all situations. So when I'm teaching you the 5 precepts, I'm going to use the original words of the Buddha, and then I'm going to relate it to today so you can see how to apply it in certain situations. The teachings of the Buddha are timeless. When you see the way he taught, his words are timeless. He's describing these natural laws, and these natural laws haven't changed since his lifetime. So we can study his actual words, and we can then see how to apply it to day-to-day life. And that's what I'm going to do for you as we walk through this teaching. And as we go, you guys are welcome to ask any and all questions that you like. We have microphones here in this white bowl in front of the camera. If you would just get a microphone and press the gray button, you're going to see lights come on. You can hold this up to your chin, and then we'll be able to hear you here at the temple, and then the people online will be able to hear you too. If you speak here without a microphone, the people online won't be able to hear you. And then for those of you guys that are online, if you're in Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, you can ask questions by putting that into the comment section, or in Zoom, you can electronically raise your hand, unmute your microphone, and then we'll be able to hear you here at the temple, and we'll be able to hear you throughout the live stream. So as we go, I'm going to pause at different times, allowing you guys to ask any and all questions that you like. When you're learning moral conduct with the Buddha's teachings, it's important to understand that he didn't teach rules and commandments. That's not what he's teaching you. You'll never get to enlightenment if you just follow a bunch of rules. You need to understand the natural laws of existence. That's what the Buddha is explaining to you, is how these natural laws are affecting you. And when you have wisdom about these natural laws, you're going to tend to make wise decisions that lead to wholesome results, or wholesome Kamma. When you have a lack of wisdom, you're going to tend to make unwise decisions that lead to unwholesome results, or unwholesome Kamma. This word Kamma is referring to this natural law of cause and effect, or action and result. This word Kamma, if it translated to just one English word, I would just use that word, but it doesn't. And you might be more familiar with this word as karma. This is the Sanskrit version. It's just a different language referring to the same law, either karma or Kamma. But the natural laws of existence that the Buddha taught in his own words, they're documented in the Pali language. And someone who studies the original words of the Buddha might use this word Kamma because that's what is documented in the original teachings of the Buddha. So I use this word Kamma, but if it translated just one English word, I would use that because it would just be easier for everybody. What the natural law of Kamma is it's cause and effect, or action and result. When you make decisions, there's going to be some result. And when you make decisions either wisely or unwisely, it's going to produce either wholesome Kamma, or wholesome results, or it's going to produce unwholesome Kamma, or unwholesome results. So this natural law of Kamma is not anything mystical or magical. It's not a black cloud following you around. It's not punishments and rewards. It's literally just helping you see this sequence of events, that when you make certain decisions, there's going to be a certain result according to that. And what the 5 precepts are doing for you is helping you to be able to see 5 impactful decisions that you could potentially make that are going to produce either wholesome or unwholesome results, or wholesome or unwholesome Kamma. When we talk about awakening to enlightenment, what we're talking about is cultivation of wisdom of these natural laws. And this is one of the primary natural laws that you're developing wisdom of, so that you can see very clearly this cause and effect between the decisions that you make and what you're experiencing in life. Sometimes when we go through life, you might think that you're experiencing good luck or bad luck, or you might think that it's destiny or fate, or you might think that what you're experiencing in life is because of other people. And as long as you resign yourself to this kind of thinking, then you'll never be able to actually improve any aspect of your life, because you'll think that whatever you're experiencing that is unwholesome is coming from other people, and you can't control other people, so therefore you can't fix whatever's going on in your life. Or if what you're experiencing is good luck or bad luck, then that means you can't fix that. There's nothing you can do to change what you're experiencing in life. Or if it's destiny or fate, you're locked in. You're a robot, essentially. And when you resign yourself to this type of thinking, then you're basically stuck. But when you understand the natural law of Kamma and you see true reality, that this is actually what's occurring, then this really empowers you to cultivate wisdom, make different decisions, and then experience different results in your life. Because if there's anything that you don't particularly care for that goes on in your life, all you need to do is cultivate wisdom, make different decisions, and you will experience different results. But if it's good luck, bad luck, if it's destiny or fate, or if what you experience is because of other people, you have no ability to change anything about your life. And you can see that that's untrue. So this natural law of Kamma is something that the Buddha is helping you to be able to understand at all times in his teachings. He's not necessarily calling that out and helping you to be able to say that, but you can see it if you understand and you see the way that he's teaching these 5 precepts. He's also helping you to eliminate certain pollutions that are in your mind. This is how you get to enlightenment. He discovered 10 individual pollutions in the mind. They're referred to as the 10 fetters. And what a fetter is it's like a shackle and a chain and a ball. This is what they had during ancient times, that if you were a criminal, they would keep you confined to a certain area by putting a shackle and a chain and a ball around your ankle, and you would just stay in an open field, and that's how you were confined to a particular area. Where today we put people in prison cells or jail cells, but during the lifetime of the Buddha, they would attach a fetter to your ankle. So he referred to these 10 pollutions in the mind as fetters because it's keeping the mind trapped in this unenlightened state, continuing to experience this discontent feelings over and over and over again. When we talk about these fetters from a high level, we talk about them and refer to them as the 3 unwholesome roots, or the 3 poisons, or the 3 fires. This is craving, anger, and ignorance. What craving is when the mind is longing, yearning, and chasing after the objects of your affection. It's like the mind has an unquenchable thirst. The mind thinks that the next new shiny object waiting around the corner is going to provide some kind of lasting satisfaction. So it chases it and chases it and chases it. If you get what you want, you get happy and you get excited. But if you don't get what you want, you get angry or sad or frustrated or some other feeling. There's pleasant feelings that the mind experiences when it gets what it wants and what it expects. And when it doesn't get what it wants, it gets these painful feelings. And this is all because of its craving, its desires. The mind thinks like, oh, I know what I need to be happy is I need more money. Let me chase that for a while. And then you chase it and you might get what you want and you get so happy. But then that fades away and now you want more money or more money. Or maybe you say, oh, I know what I need. I need a boyfriend or girlfriend. Let me chase that for a while. Or I need a bigger house or a bigger car. And the mind's seeking for satisfaction externally, thinking that these external things are going to provide some kind of lasting satisfaction. This is because of its craving, its desire, its longing and yearning and chasing after things. And now the mind forms its inner feelings based on this thing. This is called a conditioned feeling. And the mind is now experiencing pleasant feelings, painful feelings, or neither painful nor pleasant. And this is why you haven't been able to get to permanent happiness, because as long as the mind is basing its inner feelings on some condition, like the sun, for example, if you get happy when it's sunny, that sun is not permanent. It is impermanent. So now when it changes, your feelings change as well. Your mind moves to anger, sadness, or annoyment, or frustration. Or if you get happy when your bank account balance is up here, when it goes down here, you'll be sad or frustrated because this bank account balance is not permanent. Everything around you is impermanent. So as long as you continue to allow the mind to form its inner feelings based on some condition, then your mind's just going to be going up and down at different times during your life. So it's craving, desire, attachment that is causing these discontent feelings. And then when the mind's not getting what it wants, it experiences this anger. And now when this anger arises, the mind's lack of wisdom thinks that this is being caused by something external. So you might actually push people away out of your life, thinking that that's going to solve the problem, or you might push the situation out of your life, or you might be bitter and harsh and hostile towards people with your intentions, your speech, and your actions, and now they might choose to leave out of your life. Or you might put your expectations on people, trying to control people and kind of trying to force them to do things your way. And in this scenario, you can't live harmoniously with all beings because you're pushing people away or you're pushing a situation away. This is called aversion. Or you're being bitter, harsh, and hostile towards people, and they might choose to leave out of your life. Or at the very least, they're going to be bitter and harsh and hostile back to you. Or you might be putting your expectations on people and trying to control them to do things your way, because the mind thinks if I can just get my cravings fulfilled, then everything will be perfect. But this just keeps you stuck in a continuous cycle. And now when that anger is arising and the mind's being unskillful, whatever unskillfulness you put out, it's going to come back to you. And where all this is coming from is something we call ignorance, or the unknowing of true reality, the lack of wisdom, the misunderstanding, the confusion that the mind has. So these are called the 3 poisons, or the 3 unwholesome roots, or the 3 fires. So when you study something like the 5 precepts, not only is the Buddha helping you to be able to see this natural law of Kamma, of cause and effect, but he's helping you to eliminate these pollutions out of the mind. Because each one of these decisions around the 5 precepts, there's some craving, anger, or ignorance involved in making decisions in a way that is not in coherence with the 5 precepts. So I'll show you guys that as we walk through this. So now let's just get to the first precept, where we're using the words of the Buddha to be able to see what he taught about this important topic. And then I'll show you how to apply it in day-to-day life. And I'll help you see how it relates to these 3 poisons or these 3 unwholesome roots, and how it helps you to awaken to be practicing in this way. And you can see how it's helping you to understand the natural law of Kamma as well. So these are the Buddha's words on the first precept. He says, abandoning the taking of life, refraining from taking life, without stick or sword, diligent, compassionate, trembling for the welfare of all living beings. Well, whenever you're studying the teachings of the Buddha, there's nothing about belief in these teachings. You're never believing his teachings, and you're never thinking about them as rules or commandments. Instead, you need to investigate his teachings. You need to examine them. You need to learn them. So whenever you see a teaching like this, you need to get to the heart of it and really understand it. So what he's talking about here is he's talking about living beings, and he's talking about living compassionately for all living beings. So since you're not interested in making any assumptions, and you're not interested in believing anything, one of the first things you should ask yourself is, what is a living being? Don't even assume that you know what a living being is. You need to be able to get to the heart of what is a living being. So the Buddha gives you teachings on what a living being is. He teaches this in other parts of his teachings. It's called the 5 aggregates, or the 5 collections, or the 5 elements, or the 5 criteria that make a living being a living being. And these are 5 things. He says a living being has physical form, it has feelings, perceptions, volitional formations, and consciousness. So I'll help you understand what this is. What physical form is the physical form. And you know that you are a living being, so you can reflect on what I'm teaching you here to be able to independently verify whether what I'm sharing with you is true or false. Because every living being meets these criteria, and this definition is held up for 2,500 years. A living being is going to have physical form, right? There's this physical form that you have. This is one criteria, or one element, or one aggregate. The next one is feelings. A living being is going to have certain feelings, like happiness, excitement, elation, thrill, exhilaration, euphoria. They're going to have anger, sadness, frustration, irritation, annoyance, those painful feelings. And then there's going to be neither painful nor pleasant feelings, like shyness or uncomfortableness or dissatisfaction. So there's certain feelings that a living being is going to have. The third one is perceptions. What a perception is your views and opinions about the world. A living being is going to look out at the world and have certain views and certain opinions about the world. Then the fourth one is called volitional formations. This is choices and decisions. A being that is alive, or a living being, is going to make choices and decisions. They're going to have free will. And then the fifth one is called the consciousness. This is the mind. So a living being is going to have a mind. So there's form, which is physical form. There's feelings like happiness, excitement, and all those others. There's perceptions, which are views and opinions about the world. There's volitional formations, which are choices and decisions. And then there's a consciousness, or the mind. So you know that you're a living being, and you can independently verify that you have all 5 of these things. And you can look at a squirrel, or a bird, or a rabbit, or a dog, or a tiger, and you can see they have all 5 of these aggregates. And this is one of the ways that you independently verify the teachings and you don't believe them. And then you can also take things that you know are not a living being, like this chair that I'm sitting in. You can ask yourself, does it have physical form? The answer is yes, it has physical form. Does this chair have feelings? Does it have happiness, or excitement, or sadness, or anger? No, it doesn't have that, right? Does it have perceptions? Does it have views and opinions about the world? No, it doesn't have that. Does it have volitional formations? Can it make choices and decisions? Can it choose to pick itself up, walk down the street, and put itself somewhere else? No, it can't do that. It doesn't have a consciousness or a mind. No, it doesn't do that. It doesn't have that, right? So we can compare this to things that we know are living beings, and then we can compare it to things that we know aren't living beings. And this will help you to understand what a living being is. And what the Buddha is teaching you here is to live compassionately, which is the concern for the misfortune of others. Because if you cause harm to living beings, then this harm is going to come back to you. So he's teaching you not to take the life of a living being. Because if you kill a living being, then this is causing harm to another being, and now this harm is going to come back to you. So the five aggregates is something that you can learn and you can penetrate into and understand more deeply. And this is something that I normally teach students as they move further along in their development. But for right now, if it's helpful for you, you could use this definition, that a being is going to come from an egg, a sperm, and a consciousness. Okay, this isn't true in all situations. So that's why this isn't the natural law. This is like a shorthand way to think about it for the time being until you're able to fully understand the five aggregates. But it's the five aggregates that is the natural law, and that explains to you exactly how to identify a living being. Because not all living beings that have the five aggregates come from an egg, a sperm, and a consciousness. There are some living beings that don't come from an egg, a sperm, and a consciousness. So this isn't going to get you to be able to fully understand. So it's better to understand the five aggregates, but this can be a shorthand way to think about it just for the time being. And then when you understand what a living being is, then you understand that things like plants, bacteria, and viruses, they're not a living being. While oftentimes in the unenlightened state, we use language and we use words oftentimes in ways that it's not actual true reality. Because we might say, don't kill that tree, or don't kill that plant, or we might say, I'm going to kill this bacteria that's in my body by taking this antibiotic. This isn't actually true, because a bacteria isn't a living being. It doesn't have all five aggregates. It doesn't have, it has form, but it doesn't have feelings. It doesn't have perceptions. It doesn't have volitional formations, and it doesn't have a consciousness or a mind. So you can't kill something that isn't alive. So bacteria and a virus isn't alive. What you're really doing is you're eliminating the bacteria from the body. You're eliminating the bacteria from the surface of your countertop. And one of the ways that you can see this is not only through the five aggregates, but you can see it through the natural law of Kamma, that if you kill a living being, then it's going to produce unwholesome results. So if we killed a bacteria in our body and it was a living being, it would produce unwholesome results for us. But that's not what happens. When we eliminate a bacteria from the body, it produces wholesome results for us because we are actually healthier when we eliminate that bacteria. So if this was a living being and we were killing it, it would produce unwholesome results, but that's not the case. In the case of plants, we're not actually killing a plant. What we're doing is we're harvesting it. We're harvesting the wood, or we're harvesting the fruit. So why it's really wonderful to think about plants in fond ways and think of them as we would like to preserve them and make sure that they're available for us and future generations. We're going to need plants in order to eat and provide resources and things like this. So we're not actually killing that plant. What we're doing is we're harvesting the fruits, or we're harvesting the material from this plant. It's providing us a resource to sustain our life. And what we've learned over the years is that if we're going to harvest a tree, then we need to maybe plant 5 or 10 more or 20 more trees. Because in the past, when we were just harvesting and we weren't planting, it was producing unwholesome results for us. But we can see that when we harvest one tree and we plant 4, 5, 10 more trees, it's producing wholesome results for us. And we can see through the natural law of Kamma, and we can see that it's not producing any unwholesome results by harvesting this tree. It's actually providing us wholesome results because we have resources to be able to help us to sustain our life. So in this precept, when you're investigating and examining it, the first thing you need to be able to understand is what is a living being, so you ensure that you're not causing harm to a living being. Because the Buddha is teaching you to live compassionately for the welfare of all living beings. And that compassion is the concern for the misfortune of others. And compassion is a mental state that you're cultivating. And then that tends to produce certain actions, certain intentions, certain speech, certain bodily actions based on that compassion. Your actions are going to emanate from that mental state of compassion. So what you'll need to ask yourself with this precept in mind, that understanding if you cause harm to living beings, harm is going to come back to you, is you need to ask yourself if you would participate in any of these kinds of things. And it's not always black and white, right? There's euthanasia of a human or animal. There's termination of pregnancy. There's suicide, assisted suicide, capital punishment, war, government-sponsored killings, murder. These are all intentional killings. But whether you do these things or not are going to determine what you experience in your day-to-day life. And for me, I'm here to help you to be able to understand the natural law of Kamma. I'm not here to tell you what you should or shouldn't be doing in your life. Whatever you choose to do in your life, those are choices for you to make. It's not up to me to tell you what you should or shouldn't be doing, because you are your own individual being and you make your own choices. But I'm here to help you to understand the natural law of Kamma as it relates to what the Buddha is teaching you, because that's what he's helping you to awaken to. So these things up here that we see, it's not always black and white. That's why when people translate the teachings of the Buddha and they say no killing, no stealing, no sexual misconduct, no lying, and no intoxicants, this sounds like rules. It sounds like commandments. It sounds like black and white. And that's not what the Buddha is teaching you here. He's teaching you to live compassionately for the welfare of all living beings. So we can take some of these and we can compare it and contrast it to this precept. And I can help you see in situations where it might be wise, for example, to terminate a pregnancy, and in other situations, it might be unwise to terminate a pregnancy. So let's do that so you guys can see what I'm talking about here, and that you're going to need to move your mind to this higher consciousness. You're going to need to be able to think through the decisions that you're making in daily life, and it's up to you to make those decisions, not up to anybody else. You always have your own free will to make your own choices. So something like termination of a pregnancy, some people think this is like a political discussion, and I don't think about it in that way, because it's not a political thing. This is a medical technology that we have, and it can be helpful in some situations, and in other situations it could potentially be harmful. It all depends on how somebody's choosing to make decisions. But again, it comes down to each person making their own decisions in their own way. So let's take some different examples. Let's just say I was a woman, which clearly I'm not, right? Let's just say I had a womb and there was a fetus inside this womb, and through medical technology, the doctor shares with me that this fetus has no ability to have a viable life outside the womb. And this fetus, it's going to die either in the womb or it's going to die shortly after it comes out of the womb. And by allowing it to stay inside the womb, it's threatening my life, and I could potentially die in this situation, right? So in this situation, someone might choose to terminate this pregnancy, and that is living compassionately for the welfare of all living beings. Because in order to have loving kindness and compassion for all living beings, it needs to start with this being who you are. You can't have loving kindness and compassion for others if you haven't learned how to have loving kindness and compassion for this being. So if you allowed this being, or if I allowed this being to continue to grow inside the womb, it could be threatening this life. And now we know this being isn't going to survive in the womb or outside the womb. So in this situation, it could make sense to potentially terminate this pregnancy. And again, it's up for the individual to decide for themselves. But this is one way where termination of pregnancy in this medical technology could actually be beneficial for this person. But then we could potentially also see a situation where, let's just say I was having lots of sex with lots of different people, and I was regularly getting pregnant, and now I'm using termination of pregnancy as birth control. And now maybe 3, 4, 5, 6, 8 times I'm terminating pregnancy with abortion. And now what we'll see in that situation is each time you're having that type of procedure, it's causing medical concerns for the individual, that each time you have an abortion, it's causing difficulties for you, the health of this person who's choosing to actually do that. Because you can have a couple of abortions potentially, but the more that you actually have abortions, it's actually causing difficulties and health problems for your own body. So if I was intentionally killing these beings just for the sake of birth control, for example, and I was doing this regularly, 4, 5, 6, 8, 10 times, it's now going to cause health issues and complications for this being who's making those decisions. So you can see in these different situations, you can have one situation where potentially terminating pregnancy could be living compassionately for the welfare of all living beings, but you can see another situation it may not be. So it's not about whether you perform this procedure or choose to have this procedure or not. It's about whether or not you're living compassionately for the welfare of all living beings. Because what the Buddha is teaching you here with this precept is to eliminate your craving, desire, attachment, your anger. Because in order to kill a living being, there needs to be a certain amount of anger and ill will towards this being to be able to do that. So let's take some other options here too. Let's take like war. A government can share with us that, hey, go over there and kill those people in that country. We would like you to travel to that other country and kill those people because we don't like them and we want something from them. So could you go kill those people? And someone might choose to actually go do that, right? And what the government might say is, if you go over there and kill those people, that's completely fine with us. But if you come here to our country and you kill the people that are citizens in our country, we're going to put you in jail and prosecute you for murder. So this is a government law. This is a human law, and human laws are imperfect. They're not going to be perfect. So we're going to see imperfections in certain laws because humans can't create and administer and enforce laws equally. So in this situation, this individual who goes off to war, they can't escape the natural law of Kamma. They're still going to experience the results of that. So even though the government says we're not going to arrest you and put you in jail for going to kill those people, these individuals are still going to experience the results of their decisions. This is why if you go off to war, you're very likely to be killed or injured. You could potentially get brain injuries. You could have mental challenges when you come back from the war. You can get addicted to drugs and alcohol and things of this nature. You can have injuries like amputations and things of this nature. You can have difficulties reintegrating into society and getting housing and jobs and employment and things of this nature. That's the natural law of Kamma. The natural law of Kamma is completely fair. It's unbiased. It's not going to do anything particular. It's not a being controlling this. It's cause and effect. And if we choose to go off and we fight in war, you're going to experience these kinds of results. Even though the government says we're not going to arrest you, you're still going to experience the results of the natural law of Kamma. So there's different things that you're going to need to consider. Sometimes people ask me questions like, well, what if my house is being eaten by termites? What should I do? Should I kill them or what should I do? Well, in this situation, which I actually had at one time, me and my wife experienced termites infesting our house, that you're going to need to live compassionately for the welfare of all living beings. And what we chose to do is we chose to research whether we could get rid of these termites without killing them. And nowadays with the internet, we can do all kinds of research like that. And we looked and we looked and we looked and we couldn't find anything. There was no way to actually eradicate these termites without killing them. So we needed to hire somebody to come and take care of that. And they came and they put the food around and they ate this food and took it back to their nest. Because if we allowed these beings to eat our house, we're not living compassionately for the welfare of all living beings, because me, my wife, my son, living in this home, we wouldn't have had a house. It would have deteriorated, and we don't have the money to go buy another house. So living compassionately for the welfare of all living beings starts with this being who you are. And this is one of the challenges of being in the animal realm, is that these animals don't have the intelligence and the consciousness to understand that they're causing harm. Because a human being, if we ate trees, we would go out into the forest and we would eat trees because we know that that's not causing harm to anybody and it's not going to affect anybody in an unwholesome way. But these animals, these insects, they don't have that level of consciousness to understand that. So they're causing this harm. So now harm comes to them, and that's their Kamma. So you're going to see these different situations in your day-to-day life, and you're going to need to have this higher consciousness to apply this in certain situations. It's important to understand that what the Buddha isn't teaching here is he's not teaching to preserve all life at all cost. That's not what he's teaching. That's sometimes how people interpret these things, but the teachings of the Buddha aren't to be interpreted. You're learning, you're investigating, you're examining, you're reflecting to independently verify, and then you're practicing to be able to see the truth for yourself. So he's not teaching to preserve all life at all costs, because in that situation, you're going to run into all kinds of difficulties and all kinds of challenges. So for example, if you have mosquitoes that are coming at you, like what do you do, right? So if you need to be able to make wise decisions related to this natural law. And as you're making decisions, it's important to not make your decisions through craving, anger, and what we refer to as ignorance, or the unknowing of true reality. And the more that you penetrate into these teachings, you'll be able to awaken to the wisdom to be able to see what would be wise and what would be unwise. And in these situations that we're talking about so far, there's no craving, anger, and ignorance. In the decision to eradicate these termites, there was no craving. We took our time to research this. There was no anger towards the termites, and there was no ignorance. There was just, hey, we need to take care of this, and let's do this, and let's do it in the best way that we can, and making sure that we're making wise decisions here. Then sometimes students ask me things about things like do not resuscitate or DNR. This is like a legal contract that you can put in place while you're alive that tells your living family members that if this being dies, that you're not interested in being brought back to life with medical technology. And if you've got one of these in place, this is still living compassionately for the welfare of all living beings. You haven't taken any life here. All that's happened is that this being has died, and now you're saying, I'm completely comfortable with death, and you don't need to bring medical technology in to bring me back to life. So if you have one of these, you're still practicing this precept. Then sometimes students ask me about defense and protection. They say, hey, what if I'm in my home and at 3 a.m. in the morning, someone breaks in? What am I supposed to do? Well, what I share with people is that if someone breaks into your home at 3 a.m., they're not bringing you chocolate and flowers, right? They're not there to, give you something wonderful. They're there to do harm. And what I would encourage you to do is, if you can, get out of the house, right? If they want to steal something, if they want to damage something, fine, up to them. Get out of the house, call the police, let them come with their training and their tools and things like this to be able to take care of that problem. But this isn't a black and white situation, right? This is where you need to move to the higher consciousness to be able to think through all the variables that you're experiencing and then make a wise decision. Because what if someone breaks into your house at 3 a.m. in the morning, you look outside and there's a gang of 20 people outside? You're not going to go outside your house. That would be unwise. So the Buddha's not giving you this decision tree. He's not saying, if this happens, do this. If this happens, do that, right? Because that would be a permanent answer for every single situation. And there's too many variables involved that you can't have a decision tree such as that. So you're going to need to move to this higher consciousness and make wise decisions in any given situation. So if you couldn't get out of the house, this person's coming into your bedroom, you're backed up against the corner, it wouldn't be living compassionately for the welfare of all living beings to sit there and let this person beat you up or stab you with a knife or shoot you with a gun or damage other people. Maybe they're trying to murder other people in your household or rape other people in your household or something like this. So if you need to apply force in order to stop this person from causing harm, that's that person's Kamma. You didn't go out into the world actively looking to hurt somebody. You're just minding your own business in your home, and now this person is coming at you and causing harm, and you would like to cause the least amount of harm as possible to stop that harm from coming to you and the people in the home. And you're going to need to process this on a case-by-case basis, having a calm mind and be able to make wise decisions in any given situation. Then sometimes people ask me about what they eat and how they consume certain resources and whether or not they should be vegan or not. This is something for everybody to consider for themselves. Again, I'm not here to tell you what you should or shouldn't be doing, but what you'll notice is that if you do move to a plant-based food supply, there's significant benefits in having done so. Because when we eat meat, we're actually participating in the killing of another being. And it's very challenging to live compassionately for the welfare of all living beings while eating another living being. So if you decide to move to a plant-based food supply, you're going to notice that the body and the mind becomes more healthy. Because when you're eating the flesh of an animal, you're not just eating the flesh of the animal. There are certain drugs and hormones and toxins in the flesh of the animal that you're ingesting, and it's affecting the health of the body and the health of the mind. They've actually done research on this, and they can see there's much more sickness in the body when you're eating meat. And these substances that are in the animal flesh, it's affecting your own body and it's affecting your own mind. They've taken wild fish, for example, out of clean running streams in places like the USA, and they've tested the flesh of the animal, and they found all kinds of substances, over 90 different substances in the flesh of this fish. And they found things like cocaine and antidepressants and things like this, because human beings are flushing all that stuff down into the toilet, into the water table, and now the fish are absorbing that. So when you're eating this, not only in farmed animals are you eating, antibiotics and these kinds of things, but in wild animals, you're eating the substances that are in the water table, like cocaine and antidepressants and things like this. So this is something for you to look at for yourself. Again, I'm not here to tell you what you should or shouldn't do, but there is this cause and effect, or this action and result. There are certain results that you're experiencing as a result of any decision that you make. And these are just some of the decisions that you might encounter related to this particular precept. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pause here and see what questions you guys have on this particular topic of the first precept. Remember, you guys can use the microphones, or online you can put those into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like. So does anybody here online have any questions? Galit, you have a question?
What do people do in countries, for example, that don't have, going back to wars or government-sponsored killings? What do people do in countries that have like mandatory drafts and don't have the choice of not going to war or not going to protect their country?
There is a choice there, right? Because you could go to jail and sit in jail for a period of time, or you could leave and escape out of the country. So even though there's a draft and the government is trying to force people to go off to war, you can still make a decision to do something different. And whether someone chooses to do that or not is up to them. I had a student one time, actually happened to be from Israel, who was drafted into the military, and they went off, but they said that even though they were holding a gun, they never actually shot it, and they were involved in lots of combat, and all their peers around them were shooting, and they ended up dying. And they said they didn't actually die, but they never actually shot their gun, even though they were standing there as if they were shooting it. So there's choices that we're making, and this individual was still alive because they didn't do any killing. Where some people might go to jail, or some people might evade the country and escape out of the country. These are all options that we make, and that's where it comes down to your own personal choices, and you have to decide for yourself what will be wise and what would be unwise in any given situation. And I couldn't sit here today and tell you all the variables you're going to encounter and tell you exactly how you should make a decision. But one of the ways that students oftentimes gain more insight into these types of teachings is as they're encountering certain situations, they will think about it and reflect on it, and they will come up with a decision that they think is wise, and then they will reach out to their teacher and they'll say, "Hey teacher, I have this situation. Here's all the variables. Here's the way I'm thinking about making the decision. What do you think?" And then I will give them some thoughts there. And I never tell them what they should or shouldn't do. I just help them to understand the natural law of Kamma. And this is one of the ways that you learn about the natural law of Kamma, is through your own experiences, through your real life situations. And then when you make your decisions, you can see the results, that they're either going to be wholesome or unwholesome. Because the natural law of Kamma is going to teach you where you're making wise decisions and where you're making unwise decisions, because it's the most unbiased teacher you'll ever find, because you'll see that there's certain wholesome results and unwholesome results that you experience. So there are situations like this, but there's always choices, and oftentimes people don't see it as a choice, but there is choices to leave or go to jail or go off into the war and just don't shoot your gun, which I don't necessarily suggest that one, but that's what this one individual did. So there are choices and there are decisions, and it's always going to produce some kind of result. Mm-hmm. We have a question coming in on Zoom here. Let me just take a look. Looks like Mark has a question. He's saying, "Morning, David and everyone. If I saw an injured animal that was suffering and beyond help, would I be using kindness to kill the animal to end its suffering?" So in this situation, I wouldn't do that, because now you're making a decision for that being that it needs to die. And while that's what a lot of times people do, is they do euthanasia or things like this, you're now making the decision that this animal should die. And in all situations, that's not necessarily the wisest choice. I've actually have students before that contacted me and they were interested in euthanizing their animal. And I let them know, like, you do whatever you think is best, but you're making the decision to do this. And now this is why afterwards we oftentimes experience guilt or shame or fear as a result of having killed this animal. An animal that is nearing death, or it's been injured or something like this, this is the results of that being's decisions. This being is injured or experiencing sickness or whatever it is because of certain decisions that it's made. And now if we allow that being to experience the results of its decisions, it will then be more likely to be reborn into a better position to be able to then get to enlightenment beyond that. What oftentimes people are experiencing when they see an animal that is suffering is they are experiencing painful feelings themselves, the human being. And now the human being has a craving for this animal to be healthy. And now they experience sorrow and grief and pain and displeasure because they see this animal that they're attached to having some kind of medical illness. And you're not going to solve your painful feelings by killing this other animal. So this animal is in the animal realm. It can't get to enlightenment in that existence. It's going to need to be reborn into a human or heavenly existence to be able to get to enlightenment, because the real problem that it's experiencing is not this medical issue or this sickness. The real problem that this animal is experiencing is it's stuck in the cycle of rebirth, just like every other living being. And the best thing that we can do for this being to help it to be able to get to an existence where it has the opportunity to escape out of this cycle of rebirth is to allow it to experience all its Kamma, so that then it can potentially be reborn into a better existence, so that then it can actually make its way to enlightenment. So killing the animal is actually going to produce unwholesome results for you. This is why the mind might experience guilt or shame or fear or stress or anxiety or other feelings like that. That's the unwholesome results that you're experiencing as a result of having made unwise decisions. So whether somebody chooses to euthanize their animal or not is totally up to them, but I wouldn't advise it. And in this situation where this one student came to me and asked me what they should do, and I said, do what you think is best, but here's what I would do. And my choice was, I said, I wouldn't euthanize the animal. And this person ultimately, against the doctor's advice, chose not to euthanize the animal. The doctor said, your animal's going to die within the next week or two. You should euthanize it. And the person ultimately decided not to euthanize their animal. And it actually lived for another 1.5 or 2 years. Right? Whereas if they would have euthanized it, you're actually taking the life of that being. And it actually, over the course of like 2 or 3 months, it actually got back to health, where this doctor had said, there's no way this animal's ever going to get back to health ever again. So yeah, there was a 2 or 3 month period where the animal was struggling, but ultimately it got back to health, right? So these are the kinds of decisions that if we choose to kill this animal or euthanize this animal, then we're making choices for the animal when that might not be the best way to do things. And we're taking the life of this being into our own hands, where we should allow this being to live out its own life and make its own decisions. Okay, let me see if we have anything coming in on Facebook or YouTube. Okay, I'm not seeing anything there, but it looks like you have a question. Oh, we have one on Zoom here.
On? So, whether killing a mosquito or not is not so well defined. It's more about personal interpretation, meaning that to enlightened people, one might consider it as a wholesome and the other as not. Am I getting it correctly?
That's not necessarily true. So if I was being affected by mosquitoes, what I would do is I would try to deter them. There's certain natural oils that you can put on the body that mosquitoes won't bite you when you have those natural oils on the body. And that's what I would suggest for people to do, is do something like that, because you're not interested in killing even a mosquito. Or, they have like clothing that you can wear that protects the body from mosquitoes. These are all options that you could use rather than killing, because when you there's a certain aggression and certain anger there to be able to kill a particular mosquito. So what I do is I just brush them off, or I blow them off with my breath. And this is living compassionately. And if you can have compassion, this level of compassion for a mosquito, then perhaps it will help you to develop compassion towards human beings and other animals and things like this. So by taking your time and not being so aggressive and bitter and hostile in these situations, it will help to cultivate the mind and eliminate that craving, that anger, that ignorance that is polluting the mind and causing it to make unwise decisions. So I've never seen an enlightened being that has killed or continues to kill, killing mosquitoes and stuff like this. I haven't seen enlightened beings that would choose to do that. Enlightened beings wouldn't kill a being that is just buzzing around. No need to kill this being.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. Mm-hmm. But for example, a person who found himself in the environment where there is high probability of poisonous mosquitoes, right, might consider that love for himself would override this type of logic, mm-hmm. and take care of himself not to die because of the mosquito's poison and kill him. Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm just asking whether of course this is like, for the most cases it makes perfect sense, mm-hmm. but like there are cases where this could be turned around, and I'm just wonder if there is in this way of thinking is very precisely no, or there are things that can be interpreted in basically opposite ways and still be considered as living a wholesome life.
Yeah, what I teach people to do is try to deter the mosquitoes from biting and using a natural oil or wearing clothing. And that's the best way to practice this precept of living compassionately, because you're living compassionately for this being, who you are, and you're living compassionately for the mosquitoes. In a situation where you're killing a mosquito, you might be living compassionately for this being, but you're not doing all that you could do in order to live compassionately for the mosquito, because there's other things you can do to practice that compassion, that level of compassion. Mm-hmm. Okay, so it looks like Janae has a question on Zoom. Go ahead, ma'am.
So my question is slightly off topic, so I don't know if you have time to answer it.
It would be best if we stick with the 5 precepts for today, but we can talk privately if you have a question on something else.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome. Okay, so I'm going to move to this next one. This next one is a lot more straightforward and easier to explain for you guys. This first one, oftentimes people really struggle with it and have challenges to be able to see it. And you really need to think about these teachings. It's not a matter of just sitting in one class with me and understanding these precepts. You're going to need to really take some time to think them through. But this second one, the Buddha says, abandoning the taking of what is not given, living purely, accepting what is given, awaiting what is given without stealing. So here the Buddha is talking about taking things from other beings, because when you're taking things from other beings, this is a certain amount of craving. There's a longing, yearning that is in the mind, and the mind doesn't want to spend the time and effort and energy to work to acquire that particular thing. And the mind thinks, I'm just going to take it from this person. So there's a certain amount of craving there in the mind, a certain amount of anger and ill will. And then there's a certain amount of ignorance, or that unknowing of true reality that's in the mind, not realizing that you're causing harm to this other being by taking this object from them. So we can walk through this where you can understand that what the Buddha is teaching you is not to steal, because when you take something from somebody, you're causing harm to that being, and now this being is going to have certain struggles and challenges because of that. So if I stole somebody's car, they now can't take their children to school. They can't go to work and get an income. They can't acquire the basic needs and necessities from the store in order to sustain their life and acquire resources. So stealing is going to cause harm to this particular being. It's also helpful to not assume that something can be taken or used. So if I was like a college student and I walked into the classroom and I was about to turn in a paper, and I saw a stapler on the desk of the professor, and I just grabbed the stapler and I started stapling the paper, now I've assumed that this can be used. And now maybe the professor walks in and is like, hey, what are you doing? That's my stapler. right? Maybe they're attached to their stapler. They don't want to share, right? Because not everybody's practicing these teachings. So in this situation, this person gets angry. They get frustrated because I'm using their stapler. And now they attribute those painful feelings that they're experiencing to me. And they think that I'm the one who's causing them to be angry. And now maybe they fail me on that paper, or maybe they fail me in the entire class because of their anger. So if you would like to have wholesome results, you would like to check in with people to determine whether or not you can use a particular object before you use it. Where if I asked the professor, hey, can I use the stapler? And they were like, no, you can't use that. Like, okay, no worries. Now I'll go find someone that I can borrow their stapler. Or I might go to the store and buy a stapler. Whereas if I just continue to go forward without asking this professor, I would be causing harm in the situation because I'm using something without permission. So one of the things that the Buddha is teaching you, among all other things, is he's teaching you how to navigate a world with a bunch of unenlightened beings, because there's a lot of people in the world who are unenlightened. And this person being attached to their stapler, if I just use it, then this person gets angry and they don't realize that they're causing their own anger. So by ensuring that you're not assuming that something can be used or taken, it kind of protects you and keeps you in a situation where you're not using things that don't belong to you and that people might be attached to. This other part where the Buddha is talking about accepting what is given, what he's talking about is in terms of like, if somebody's practicing generosity with you, what he's teaching you is to accept what is given. So if grandmother gives you that sweater at Christmas time that you know that you will never, ever, ever wear, it's wise to just accept it, right? And you just accept that sweater. You're like, thank you so much, Grandma, because this generosity that Grandma's practicing, that's helping her mind, right? To let go. It's training her mind to give and to share. And now you accept that sweater. But putting it in the closet and just letting it sit there for 20 or 30 years is unwise, because now that resource goes to waste, right? But if we shut down Grandma's generosity, we're like, no, I don't want that. Now we're hindering her from being able to practice to enhance the quality of her mind. And now it's also hindering our relationship here, where Grandma doesn't feel like that she can practice generosity with me. So if I accept that sweater from Grandma and I'm like, oh, thank you so much, Grandma. That's very kind of you to share with me. Thank you for thinking about me. And now I give it to somebody else. And I say, hey, maybe somebody else could wear this sweater. And now maybe it goes through 6, 8, 10 different hands, and it finds somebody that looks at it and says, that's the most beautiful sweater I have ever seen. I'm going to wear that every day of my life, right? And now someone's actually got to benefit from that actual sweater. So we can accept what is given, and it can enhance the quality of this person's mind, and it can keep our relationship harmonious. But remember, these teachings aren't black and white. If someone offers you crystal methamphetamine, are you going to accept what is given? Right? No, right? Or someone offers you heroin, you're not going to accept what is given. So these teachings, they're not black and white. You need to use your higher consciousness and think through the decisions that you're making and decide whether it would be wise or unwise in any given situation. But in general, it's wise to accept what is given so that people can practice generosity and it can enhance the quality of their mind. The Buddha also teaches awaiting what is given. What this is that you don't put expectations on people to be able to get you things. Like say you have a life partner and they're going on a business trip. If you were like, oh, honey, get me this and get me that and get me this and get me that. And now you just loaded them up with all this burden to go off into the world and get you what you want. And now when they come back and they haven't gotten you what you want, maybe you get angry or frustrated or agitated because they didn't get you what you wanted. So what the Buddha teaches you is just await what is given. If people give you something, wonderful. And if they don't, that's fine too. No need to put your expectations on this person. This is why you don't see in a Buddhist temple that there's a plate or a basket going around wanting people to donate to us. Instead, if people would like to donate, they donate. And if they're not interested in donating, then they're not interested in donating. We're here to help people regardless. We love them unconditionally. We're here to help them regardless. So you would like to just await what is given. If somebody gives you a gift or shares something with you, wonderful. And if they don't, if they go to the business trip and they don't bring you something, that's fine too. You shouldn't base your feelings on this relationship of whether or not they give you something or not. So this is the second precept that the Buddha is teaching. Any questions on this one? See if we have any questions online. Okay, I'm not seeing anything there either. Okay, so now we've got the third one, which oftentimes is translated as no sexual misconduct. But what you can see is the Buddha's teachings on this are much more clear and much more detailed, much more illuminating. And on this previous one, often people teach this as no stealing, right? You can see the Buddha teaches much more illuminating language in this. It's not black and white. He's giving you many more details than just that. So this is why it's so helpful to study with the original words of the Buddha. If you're not studying with the original words, then you're not getting the full understanding of what he's actually teaching you. So here again, I'll read this to you and then I'll teach it to you and helping you to be able to apply it in day-to-day life. So what the Buddha says is abandoning unchastity, abandoning sexual relations with women, men who are protected by their mother, father, mother and father, brother, sister, or relatives, who are protected by teachings, who have a husband, wife, or partner, whose violation entails a penalty, or even with one who has been garlanded by a man, woman, or partner as a sign of engagement. So he's teaching about harmful conduct through our sex, because if you're having sex, you could do this in a way that's wise and that doesn't cause any harm, or you could do this in an unwise way that actually causes harm. And if you cause any harm, this harm will come back to you. So just going through these that he's teaching you, the first thing that I have here is he's talking about ensuring that you're not having sex with minors, because a child who's 8 or 12 or younger than that, or even older than that, they're growing and developing within their household, and they really need to have the ability to learn from their parents, and their parents need to have the ability to learn from them. And having sex at such a young age, it's a very impactful thing. And if we choose to do that, it's causing harm to this family and to this individual. So that's where the Buddha is saying, who are protected by their mother, father, brother, sister, relative, where it would be unwise to have sex with a young child because they need to grow and develop and to be able to come into making wise decisions. So in most places in the world, it is illegal to have sex with minors. There's certain ages that they have, right? But there's actually some places in the world that it's not illegal to have sex with a young child. And if you look at those places in the world that they're actually regularly having sex with young children, usually their economy and their social situations, their political environment is very unstable. And you can see that they're having all these difficulties because people are having sex so early in life at the age of 8 and 9 and 10 years old. These individuals are in some cases being forced to have sex, and now their environment and their society is not very stable, not very steady. And you can see this. That's the natural law of Kamma. The Buddha is talking here about whose violation entails a penalty. That's having sex without consent. That's like raping someone, having sex against their will. That would be harmful, and this is going to produce harm for you as well, because you can get beat up, you can get murdered, you can get arrested, you can get all kinds of difficulties in these situations. Where the Buddha is talking about abandoning unchastity, if you guys know what chastity is, this is like during ancient times, there were fathers who would put metal underwear on their daughters, and they would have a lock and key, and it was only the father that could unlock these metal underwear. I can't imagine walking around with metal underwear, but apparently there were people who did that. That would be chastity, where you're not having sex with anybody, right? So unchastity is exactly the opposite. It's like having sex with lots and lots and lots of people. And the Buddha is saying, abandon that. And the reason why is because this is part of the natural law. If you're having sex with multiple people, this is why we tend to get sexually transmitted diseases. This is why people oftentimes get jealous, they get beat up, they get murdered, your personal possessions get destroyed, you lose your reputation in your community. These is all the results of having sex with lots and lots and lots of different people. So that's why the Buddha is teaching that. Sex while living at home with relatives, there's some people who in their culture, if you're say in your 20s or 30s, you meet a particular person, you might come home to mom and dad or grandma and grandpa and say, hey, I met this person. We would like to have a relationship together. We're going to get married and have children, but we don't have the ability to purchase a home right now. Can we live with you for a few years, save up our money, and then we're going to go out and buy our own home? And in this situation, the family has accepted this. This isn't individuals who are being protected by their mother, father, brother, sister, relatives. This is a relationship that has been accepted by the family. And in this situation, if you're having sex, you're still practicing this precept. So you don't have to be concerned about that. Where the Buddha is talking about who are protected by teachings, what this is someone who has decided to become celibate, meaning they're not having sex with anybody. And they might be doing this for reasons to, say, get to enlightenment. Because you can get to the second stage of enlightenment and still be having sex. But in order to get to the third or the fourth stage of enlightenment, you would need to actually eliminate sexual contact, because this is actually causing the mind to continue to experience conditioned pleasant feelings that, based on some condition, the mind is going to experience these pleasant feelings. And now when you're not having sex, you might be agitated or annoyed or frustrated. So what some people do is they will learn the path to enlightenment, and they will make their way up to the second stage of enlightenment, and they will kind of hang out there for a while, particularly if you're young. And your life's going to be very peaceful, continuing to have wonderful relationships and things like this. And you can do all the other work on the path to enlightenment from that second stage of enlightenment. And then at some point when you're ready, you might decide to move into the third or the fourth stage of enlightenment by letting go of sexual activity. And when or if you ever do that, it's your choice. But this is one way that people approach it. But for people who've decided to become celibate and they're not choosing to have sex, they're trying to get to the third or the fourth stage of enlightenment, or maybe they're in those stages of enlightenment. If you try to lure this person away from their vow of celibacy, this is causing harm to that person and to the wider community. Because one of the very best things that could happen for an individual or for a community is to have enlightened beings in the community. So if an individual is, say, in that second stage of enlightenment and they're trying to get to the third stage of enlightenment, their mind hasn't yet let go of sexual activity. And if we tried to lure that person away from potentially getting to the third or fourth stage of enlightenment, it's causing harm to that person or to the wider community. And the Buddha is teaching you that it would be unwise to do that. So here in Thailand, they make this very easy for you, that people who are ordained practitioners that are wearing those orange robes, and they have other colors as well, and shaving their head, they're choosing not to have sex. So you know, like, I'm not going to have sex with that kind of person. But also in Thailand, oftentimes people who wear all white, they're not having sex either. That's not why I wear all white. I don't have sex any longer. That's not why I choose to wear white. It's not like I'm trying to advertise to people that I'm not having sex, because if someone was interested in that, I wouldn't be interested in that. But there are people in Thailand who wear all white because they're helping to let people know, like, hey, I'm not having sex. So if you're interested in having sex, you would find somebody that's also interested in having sex who's not wearing these types of clothing. So this can be a nice indicator for you of the people who are interested in having sex and who are not. So this is something that the Buddha teaches, is to not lure people away from the teachings to be able to have sex with them, because it causes harm to them and to other people as well. Where the Buddha talks about here, or even with one who's been garlanded by a man, woman, as a sign of engagement, or who have a husband or wife or partner, this is like someone who's already in a committed relationship. If someone's in a committed relationship and they go outside that relationship, if you choose to have sex with this person, this is where you can get beat up, you can get murdered, you can lose your reputation in the community, you can have your material possessions destroyed, because these other people can get very jealous about what it is that you're doing, having sex with these different people. And if they're in a relationship with someone else, that other person can come towards you and actually cause harm to you. You can even get sexually transmitted diseases in this situation, because if this person is willing to go outside of that relationship and have sex with you, they're going to go outside of your relationship and have sex with other people too. So this is why we experience those unwholesome results, because of us choosing to have sex with people outside of a committed relationship. Where if you're in a committed relationship and you go outside that relationship, or if someone else is in a committed relationship and you choose to have sex with that person, you can have all these different experiences. If someone is human trafficked, that means they're being forced to have sex, and typically for money. In this situation, if you go into that kind of environment, again, you can get beat up, you can get murdered, you can get robbed, you can get sexually transmitted diseases, you can get all kinds of difficulties like that. Some other things around this area of sex is paid sexual services. That's unchastity, having sex with lots of different people. This is where, again, you can have sexually transmitted diseases, you can get beat up, you can get murdered, you can get robbed in these kinds of environments. Sometimes people ask me about same gender partners and whether or not that is practicing this precept. If you notice, the Buddha doesn't talk about same gender partners at all in this particular precept. And the reason why is because there's no harm in two individuals that are loyal, loving, consenting adults choosing to have sex. They're not causing harm to anybody. The Buddha was aware of same-gender relationships because he talks about it in his teachings. You can see it in his teachings, but he doesn't teach anything about it. He's just making it people aware. He's talking to his students and he's helping them to understand that this is something that exists, but he doesn't give any teaching about it. He just says, hey, this is an observation that I've had. So same-gender relationships have been going on since the beginning of time. There's never been a time where all men had sex with women and all women had sex with men, because that would be permanence. And we understand the universal truth of impermanence, that some people are going to have sex with the opposite gender and some people are going to have sex with the same gender. But in a situation where it's two loyal, loving, consenting adults having sex, whether they're opposite gender or same gender, they're not actually causing harm to anybody. And that's why the Buddha didn't actually include it here in this precept. He's talking about harmful decisions related to sexual activity. So there's not going to ever be a time in history where everybody has sex with the opposite gender. Now, today, there's people in the world that don't understand this. And this is where you can see how wise the Buddha actually was, that 2,500 years ago, he already understood this. He already understood that same-gender relationships doesn't cause any harm. So you can see how wise he was through that. And now, today, more and more people are starting to understand this, that there's no harm here, and that it's normal for people to be having sex with the same gender. And there's not any harm in that situation because there's two loyal, loving, consenting adults choosing to have sexual contact. So that's why he didn't include it here. And if you understand the universal truth of impermanence, you understand that this is completely normal. Now, people today, some people get angry when they see a same-gender relationship couple together, but that's their craving. They're craving permanence. They're wanting every man to be with a woman and every woman to be with a man. They're causing their own anger. It's because of their craving, their anger arises, and where it's coming from is that ignorance or that unknowing of true reality. But if you have wisdom, you can see that there's no harm in same-gender relationships. Then sometimes people ask me about transgender individuals. You can understand this is completely normal through the teachings of the Buddha. You can see that the body is one thing and the mind is something completely different. These are two things that come together for this existence, but they're completely different. And if every mind that came into a body identified with the same gender as the physical body, this would be permanence. So if everybody who has male sexual organs, their mind identified as being male, and that was the case everywhere, that would be permanence. But we understand the universal truth of impermanence, that it's not possible for everybody who has male or female sexual organs to identify through the mind as being that same type of individual. And that's the gender that they have. It's just humanly impossible for that to occur. And if we understand the cycle of rebirth, that we've all been different beings at different times in the past, that maybe when we were lizards, maybe we were sisters when we were lizards, right? And maybe when we were monkeys, you were my brother, right? Or you were my father, perhaps, right? So now, if we understand that we've all been different genders in the past, it's very likely that somebody was male, 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 male in the past life, and now that mind has ended up in a female body with female sexual organs, but the mind is still identifying as a male. And this makes complete sense if you understand the natural laws and what the Buddha is actually teaching you. And you can see that this is completely normal. So if you're somebody who prefers same-gender relationships, or if you're a transgender individual, it's completely normal. You haven't done anything wrong. There's nothing to be ashamed of. It's completely explained through the natural laws of existence and the way that the Buddha taught it. And that's why he's not including these things in this particular precept, because there's no harm in somebody choosing to have a loyal, loving, consenting relationship. And there's no harm in somebody who has decided that their sexual organs of the body is one gender and their mind is identifying as another gender. There's no harm here that is occurring. Sometimes people ask me about masturbation. So let's talk about that a little bit, is that sometimes people are taught that it's all immoral and you should never masturbate and these kinds of things. But this is someone who's not understanding what the real journey is here and what you're actually looking to accomplish. What you're looking to accomplish to be able to get to enlightenment is, over time, based on your own decisions, you're working to eliminate your sensual desire, among other pollutions in the mind. One of the sensual desires, one of the strongest ones that the mind typically will have, is sexual craving. And the mind wants to be pleased sexually. And now there are situations where someone could masturbate and it could actually be helpful, but it could actually be harmful too. It just depends on how you're using it. In a situation where someone's maybe got 10 different boyfriends or girlfriends and they're hearing me talk and they're like, you know what? This is so true. Like, I shouldn't have 10 boyfriends or girlfriends. I'm actually causing a lot of harm in the world, and maybe I should just have one. And I'm going to bring this down to one person. And in the process of them doing that, maybe they have this heightened sexual craving and they use some masturbation to be able to help bring down their sexual craving. And this could actually be really helpful for them. Or say there's someone who's interested in going off and raping somebody, and they would like to rape this individual and force them to have sex against their will. But instead they choose to do some masturbation instead. This could be really helpful in that situation. So this is a situation where they're working to decrease their sensual desire, and they're using masturbation to be able to help them with that. The analogy that I can give you is it's kind of like a dam. If you've ever learned anything about a dam, that if you have a dam, which are multi-million-dollar structures to hold back water, as the water of the dam is rising, if it gets too high, it can damage the dam and it can destroy the dam. So one of the things that they do in order to alleviate that problem is they will open up the dam and they will let the water out. And then when it releases the pressure down, they will close the dam again. And this protects the dam. Well, this is the same kind of thing, that when you're eliminating craving, desire, attachment from your mind, particularly sexual cravings, you can feel this pressure in your mind building up where it's like, you just really want to have sex, because when you're having sex, you feel great and you feel all this pleasure. But then when you're not having it, you can have this agitation and this frustration in the mind. So as that pressure is building up, if you use a bit of masturbation to help you to bring that down, now you might be able to go a longer and longer period of time without having sex. So if you went like a week or two without having sex and you just feel this urge to have sex, maybe you use masturbation to drop that pressure down. And now maybe you go a month or 2 or 3, and now maybe you need some masturbation to help you. And now that brings the pressure down. And now you go 3 months or 6 months or 8 months, and now maybe you need a little bit of masturbation. So in this situation, the masturbation is helpful, and it's helping you to get to the point where you're decreasing and eliminating your sensual desire. But in other situations, you could potentially be doing this obsessively, where maybe somebody's masturbating 10, 15, 20 times a day. And in this situation, you're increasing your sensual desire. Maybe you're even using pornography in this situation. And if you're doing these things now, you're not a bad person. You haven't done anything wrong. It's just that the mind has a certain amount of sensual desire, and you would like to start scaling that back so that you can get some more peacefulness and more joy. Because as long as you allow that in the mind, your mind's not going to be able to be peaceful and joyful all the time. Because when you're having sex, or you're having sexual contact or masturbating, you'll feel pleasant feelings. But when you're not getting it, then you'll be agitated and frustrated and annoyed. And that's why you can't get to permanent peace and permanent joy as long as there's sensual desire in the mind and there's this sexual contact. So masturbation can be used in a helpful and beneficial way. It just depends on how you're using it and in what situations. Sex with animals is one of those things that is actually black and white. It's very clear. I've never done this. I've never known anybody that's done it, but I imagine if somebody did do it, there would be lots of harm involved, because an animal can't give you consent to have sex with it. And I imagine if somebody did, there would be disease and illness and possibly injury in this situation. So that's one of the things that are actually black and white here. And then you might look at pornography. If you have pornography, you're going to need to look at that and realize that this is causing your mind to have sensual desire, and you can get addicted to this, and you can really go down into this fantasy world with pornography. And in order to train your mind to be peaceful and joyful, you're going to need to eliminate that craving. If you go down to this path of pornography, you can sometimes get so indulged in it that it becomes like a fantasy world. And now even when you start choosing to have sex with human beings, it can be somewhat unsatisfying for you because you've gone down down into this fantasy world so deeply. So if you're interested in having sexual contact, I would encourage you to go towards an actual partner where you can have intimacy and you can have contact with that person. Whereas if you go down this path of pornography, it oftentimes creates more problems for you because the mind gets obsessed with this. And then even when you're coming out of it, it's really hard to have satisfying and fulfilling relationships because your mind is so used to this fantasy world with the pornography. So this is what I have to share on this precept. Do you guys have any questions on this one? Yes, if you could get a mic. And for those of you guys online, you can put your questions into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like.
Does this work now?
Yeah, it's working.
How does it behave with like open relationships, so consensual, ethical, non-monogamy?
Yeah, what you're going to find in those situations is you run into the same problems, is that even though these people have agreed that it's okay to have sex with multiple people, you're still going to potentially have sexually transmitted diseases in these situations. You can still get to the point where people are attached to each other, and now there's jealousy and envy, and people are fighting and struggling. They don't feel trustworthy and faithful and committed in a relationship, and oftentimes these relationships divulge and kind of get diluted to the point where there's not the loyalty and committed relationship. The best way to do this would be to have a loyal, loving, committed partner where you guys can build a relationship together. And now you guys know that, hey, this person's with me and we can build this wonderful relationship together. Whereas if you're out there just satisfying your own cravings for sex by having sex with lots of beings, this is like an animalistic instinct. And us human beings, we're not animals, we're human beings, and we can become a better and better human being. And part of that is to get to the point where you're comfortable with having sex with just one person in a loyal, loving, consenting relationship. And then over time, to be able to get to this peace and the joy, we ultimately need to eliminate sexual contact 100%. But even in open relationships, it's going to produce unwholesome results because of the unchastity that the Buddha is talking about here. Okay, let me see if we have any other questions. Okay, I'm not seeing any other questions anywhere. So let's move to the next one, which is the fourth precept. This one, the Buddha is saying, abandoning false speech, refraining from false speech, a true speaker, one to be relied on, trustworthy, dependable, not a deceiver of the world. So you can see the much more illuminating language again. Oftentimes people say, the Buddha taught no lying, right? That sounds like a rule or a commandment or black and white. He's giving you much more illuminating language to help you understand why it's important to speak the truth. If you tell lies, which we all have, growing up as children, we all lied a lot, different times, we've lied. There's an underlying craving there. The mind wants something. And if it tells the truth, it's not going to get what it wants. So that's why we lie, is because we want something. We have a craving, a desire, a longing, a yearning. So in order to get to the point where you've completely purified the mind and you get to this peace and joy, you need to be able to speak the truth, because then you'll be loyal, you'll be dependable, you'll be trustworthy, you won't be deceiving people. And now when that professional project comes up that somebody would like to staff you on, and it's going to be really beneficial for your career, they're like, oh, I know who we can do, who can staff that. This person over here who's very trustworthy. Because if we're out there lying, people are going to discover our lies, and then they're not going to be able to trust us. And then when some great project comes up that would really benefit our career, they're not going to staff us on it. Or if you've done a lot of lying, you know that your mind is almost obsessively trying to figure out what you said to one person versus what you said to this person and what you said to that person. So how could you ever get to peace and joy in your life if your mind is obsessively trying to figure out what you said to one person versus another? Whereas if you just speak the truth and based on what you know, you never have to worry about what you said to one person versus another person. And this will help your mind to be more calm and more peaceful as you navigate the world. The Buddha understood this so well that I've included this other teaching here to be able to help you see what he was teaching on this topic. Here he's teaching his son Rahula. Sometimes people think the Buddha left his family and he never actually came back. This isn't actually true. He left for 6 years in order to train his mind, but then he ends up coming back in contact with his family and his son and his wife and his mother, which was the stepmother, and other people like this come to learn with him. So he's teaching his son Rahula here that even when you tell a joke, you shouldn't tell a lie. If you can imagine this wise individual who's sitting in a classroom like this and teaching to people and helping people to learn the path to enlightenment, but on the side, if he's like telling jokes that are lies, people are like, I don't know whether to trust this guy. When he's in class and he's teaching these natural laws, I can kind of see what he's talking about, but over here he's lying. How could I ever really trust this individual? So the Buddha understood the natural law of Kamma so well that even when he tells a joke, he wouldn't lie. Now, you might not associate a Buddha with someone who tells jokes, because usually when we see the Buddha, he's in all these somber positions of meditating and looking so serious and everything like this. But a Buddha tells jokes, right? They're charismatic. They have a personality, just like you. An enlightened being is going to have fun, and they're going to joke and be jovial and things like this. So an enlightened being, ultimately the Buddha, he told jokes, right? So there's no harm in telling jokes. But what you would like to do is do that extra bit of work to tell a truthful joke. They usually take more effort to be able to tell a truthful joke, but they're usually more funny as well. And when you get used to telling jokes in this way, you'll see that it actually puts your mind at ease, and it helps you in your communication with the people around you. Where sometimes when people joke, not only do they lie sometimes, but they also might be degrading and diminishing of other people or themselves. And this is unwise to joke in this way. If you can joke in positive and uplifting ways, you'll find that you'll have much more harmonious and healthy relationships. And that's what the Buddha is teaching you here. So any questions on this precept? Yes, ma'am.
So just what about white lies?
Yeah, this is a question that oftentimes comes up. What people refer to as a white lie is they think it's a harmless lie. Like, let me use a common example that I tend to hear, which is usually it's a man, and they'll say, what if my wife or what if my girlfriend says, hey, honey, how do I look? We're going out on a night on the town, like, how do I look? And if you think they look bad, am I supposed to say they look good? That's a white lie, right? Where they think it's harmless. Well, in this situation, it's still harmless, or it's still harmful, right? Because what this person is looking for is they're looking for confidence. They don't have confidence at whatever they put on. They obviously chose to acquire these clothing for one reason or another, and they're looking for you to have confidence in them so that now they can feel comfortable to go out on the town or go out to dinner or whatever it is that you're doing. So what I encourage you to do in those kinds of situations is just be like, oh, you know what, honey? I enjoy spending time with you. It doesn't matter what you wear. I always have good time with you. Let's go have fun. Right? Because it really doesn't matter. If they feel like this is something they would like to purchase or acquire and they're put it on, then let's just go have fun, rather than sit there and be like, no, you don't look good. It makes your butt look too big or whatever it is, right? Like, instead of doing those kinds of things, like, that's just going to degrade this person's confidence. Just say something positive and uplifting. Say, I have fun no matter what you wear. Let's go have fun. Or I think, you're beautiful no matter what you wear. Let's go have a good time, right? And that's what you would really like to reply to these kinds of situations. Or another example that people oftentimes ask me is they say, well, what about during World War II, like maybe Nazi Germany, if somebody ran into their house and a soldier was chasing them, and now they're at your front door and they say to such and such, run into your house. Do you tell the truth so that they can murder this person? And the answer is you can tell the truth, but telling the truth doesn't mean you tell everything that you know, right? So if a soldier came up to my house and said, does such and such run into your house? And I know with 100% certainty they're hiding under my bed. I'm going to say, oh, are you looking for Barbara? Maybe we should look outside. Maybe she's hiding in the bush somewhere. Let's go look outside. I'll help you look. Come on, let's go look, right? I'm going to try to redirect this person away from my home. And I haven't lied in this situation. I'm telling the truth because I haven't actually said anything other than ask them a question. Oh, are you looking for Barbara? Maybe we should look at the bush over there. Let's go over there to the bush and look, right? I haven't said that, no, she's not in my house, right? Or yes, she is in my house. I haven't said any of those kinds of things. I'm just redirecting this person somewhere else. So telling the truth doesn't mean that you tell everything you know. no, unless you're in a situation like a court of law or something like that, where there's real important, impactful decisions. And the Buddha teaches you this too, where he says, if you're in a court of law or something like this, you should tell the truth and fully everything that you know about a situation, because that's going to be best in those kinds of situations. Okay, not seeing any other questions anywhere. So let's go to the last precept. This is the very last one. This is the words of the Buddha here. He says, refraining from strong drink and sloth-producing drugs, substances that cause heedlessness, the basis for heedlessness. So remember, whenever you're studying the teachings of the Buddha, you need to investigate and examine his teachings. You're not believing anything, and you're not just assuming that you know what he's talking about. So when I ran across this, I didn't know what this word heedlessness meant. And I was like, I would like to go check. I kind of had a feeling I knew what it meant, but I wasn't 100% sure. So I went and checked, and this is what I came back with. The word heedlessness means careless, thoughtless, inattentive, uncalm, unaware, or unmindful. And what the Buddha is teaching you is to not put substances into the body that's going to promote that type of mindset. Because what he's teaching you to do is cultivate mindfulness or awareness of mind. That's part of the Eightfold Path. And by having awareness of mind, now you can make wise decisions, and you can purify your mind. You can get rid of the unwholesome qualities, and you can cultivate wholesome qualities in your mind. But if you don't have awareness of mind, you're not going to be able to do that. So that's why he's teaching you in this way that is timeless. He's saying any substance that produces heedlessness, it would be unwise to ingest this. And this can apply for during his lifetime and long into the future, because he could have never imagined all the different substances that we would have created, like PCP and LSD and all these other chemical-based substances. He could have never imagined those kinds of things. So he taught in a way that is timeless, that if there's any substance that is ever involved that you could put into the body that promotes heedlessness, it would be unwise to do that. They even have things like huffing paint and things like this that produces heedlessness, right? So he could have never imagined these kinds of things. So once you understand what heedlessness is, you can start applying it to the different substances that you see. And I have a list of some things here that we'll talk about, but it's not a comprehensive list, because there's other substances out there as well. And it's not always black and white, because there's substances like marijuana that have been shown to have medical purposes, right? It's irrefutable that this substance has some medical properties. There's children who have like 20 seizures a day, and they give this child one drop of CBD oil on the tongue, and then they don't have another seizure for like 6 months, right? This is scientifically proven in these situations. So it has medical benefits. So you need to be able to look at a situation and decide whether or not it would be wise for you to use any of these particular substances. So in this situation with this child and having CBD oil in the seizures, yeah, we can see that this is really wise for this person to ingest the substance. But in those situations where you're using this plant marijuana for medical purposes, you would really like to research this and figure this out, because the marijuana plant has two different aspects to it. It has the CBD, which are the qualities and attributes that are helpful for medical purposes. And then there's THC, which is what produces the high. And if you're going for a high where you're trying to become heedless, you're going to be looking for a high THC. And oftentimes people are smoking it sometimes, right? Where if you're looking for medical purposes, you're usually looking for a plant that's high in CBD and very low in THC. And you're usually going to ingest it through an edible or something like this, or maybe an oil, because you're not interested in causing damage to the lungs. So these are things that you would like to look at. Stress and anxiety and things like this is never going to be solved with marijuana. Sometimes people have stress or anxiety and they might decide to take marijuana, and they're thinking that this is going to solve their stress or anxiety. But that's not going to solve it, because what's causing the stress and anxiety is craving, desire, attachment, the longing and the yearning in the mind. So the way to get rid of your stress and anxiety is to eliminate your craving, desire, attachment. The marijuana would just be covering it up, and it's not actually dealing with it. So you need to look at things like that. Cigarettes, we know that it doesn't have any medical benefits whatsoever, and more and more people have figured that out over the years, and this is why people are going away from it. But you can see when we're smoking cigarettes, it causes damage to the body, and this is the unwholesome results of our unwise decision to do that. So if you're currently smoking cigarettes, it would be wise for for you to gradually move away from that. That's typically the best way to get rid of unwholesome things in your life. It's also the best way to increase wholesome things, is to do it gradually, because your mind craves permanence. It holds on to things. The mind doesn't like change. In the unenlightened state, it doesn't appreciate change. So when you're implementing wholesome things into your life and you're getting rid of unwholesome things, if you do this gradually, your mind will tend to adopt to it more easily. So if I was smoking 20 cigarettes a day, I would probably go down to 18 cigarettes for like a week or two. Let the body and the mind adjust to that. Then after it adjusts to that, I'd probably go down to like 15 for like a week or 2 or 3. And then I'd go down to 12 and so forth and so on, until eventually I may be smoking 1 or 2 per day. And then now I'm smoking one day and none the next day. One day, none the next day. And then one day, 2 or 3 or 4 days without it. One day, maybe 5, 6, 8 days without it. And this is how you slowly train the mind to get rid of these things. You can go cold turkey where you're just completely stepping away from something, but oftentimes it's so challenging for the mind to experience that change that it doesn't really work so well. Some people can have success that way, but what you're going to find is that the mind's going to appreciate this gradual changes of gradually eliminating unwholesome things and gradually increasing wholesome things like meditation and coming to the temple and things like this. You're going to need to even pay attention to things like prescription medications, because there's some prescription medications that can be addicting. If a doctor prescribed you a medication, you would like to look at it and research it and try to figure out whether it's addictive or not, because you might be able to ask the doctor for another option, and there might be another option that isn't going to be addictive. But sometimes what they're going to tell you is, no, this is the only option. This is what you need to be able to take. And in that situation, if you know that it's addictive, then you would like to take that medication for the shortest amount of time as possible and then get off of it as quick as possible, so you don't allow the mind and the body to become addicted to it. You're going to even need to look at your caffeine intake, because ingesting caffeine, this is a stimulant, this is a drug, this is something that is producing heedlessness, and you can see this and know the truth for yourself because your mind becomes overactive. And what happens is your mind goes up into this excited state, and then when you don't have caffeine, you drop off. And by the time you get to enlightenment, you have sustainable energy all throughout your day. An enlightened being doesn't get exhausted or tired. They get sleepy where they need to get some sleep, but they're not exhausted or tired. Their mind is uplifted and bright and radiant all throughout their day. Whereas if you're relying on a substance to lift you up and stimulate the mind, and then you're crashing after that, then the mind never gets the ability to develop this natural energy that can be sustaining all throughout your day. And you'll be able to see that this is actually a stimulant and a drug, because if you start to detox from the caffeine, you're going to see that there's withdrawal symptoms. You can have shakes, you can have headaches, you can have dry mouth and things like this. And these are all the side effects of withdrawing from the caffeine. So whether you choose to eliminate caffeine or when or if you do it, it's your choice. I'm not here to tell you what you should or shouldn't do, but you will find that your mind performs better when you don't have caffeine and you allow the mind to build this natural energy. And you even need to pay attention to things like sugar. If we take sugar in excess, it can produce heedlessness as well. We kind of learned that as a child, right? If we had a lot of candy, we might have seen that we have this sugar high and then we crash. So as adults, we tend to kind of move away from that stuff. There's some people that will tell you that psychedelic substances are going to actually help you get to enlightenment. This isn't actually true. Psychedelic substances can promote things in the mind that kind of peers in and kind of looks at some aspects of what one might think about when they're making their way to enlightenment. The mind can become very introspective when you're taking psychedelic substances, but that's a quality that you need to develop naturally. You're going to need to be introspective at all times during your day in order to be able to produce the mind to get to this enlightened mental state. So if you can only be introspective when you take this psychedelic substance, you're never allowing the mind to naturally build this ability to be introspective. The way that I think about psychedelic substances is it's kind of like you're window shopping and you're walking down the street on the sidewalk and you see this beautiful handbag or this beautiful pair of shoes inside the store, and you'd love to really go in there and like take a look at that handbag and touch it and feel it and maybe acquire that handbag, but you're chained down to the sidewalk outside where you can't actually go inside and touch it and feel it and acquire this handbag. So it's kind of like what psychedelic substances do, is it kind of promotes this environment in the mind where it kind of appears as though that the mind's becoming introspective and it's kind of awakening, but yet you can never really get to enlightenment because this psychedelic substance is holding you down and not allowing you to actually fully experience the enlightened mental state. So if you're out there and you see people talking about psychedelics and they actually help you to get to enlightenment, this is actually untrue. You're going to see that you aren't going to be able to naturally develop the introspection that you need to be able to look inward and develop the mind in the way that you actually need to be able to get to enlightenment. Because there's going to be certain things that are happening in your day-to-day life. And in that moment, you need to be introspective to look inward and figure out what would be the best thing to do in this situation. And if you can only be introspective when you have this psychedelic substance, then you're not going to be able to do that. You're not going to be like, hold on, Mom, I know you're asking me a question, but let me drop this hit of acid and then I'll let you know what I have to say about that, right? You're not going to be able to do that kind of thing. You're going to need to be able to be introspective and move to this higher consciousness and have that introspection all throughout your day, not just when you're taking a psychedelic substance. Okay, so again, this isn't an exhaustive list. These are just some substances to think about. You're going to need to apply this with whatever comes out. There's going to be the next new substance that comes out that somebody's talking about. So if you understand this word heedlessness and you're not interested in promoting heedlessness, you'll understand how to apply this to all the different substances that might come out in the world. And one of the reasons why this is the last precept is because if you're not practicing this one, you're more likely to do all the others. You're more likely to kill, to steal, to have sexual misconduct, and to lie. If you go to jail or you go to prisons, for example, and you talk to prisoners, you'll talk to people and they'll be like, yeah, I'm here for murder, or I'm here for robbing a bank, or whatever they say. But if you really talk to them and you're like, no, like really, why are you here? About 80% of them will tell you that they would have never murdered that person if they weren't high on some drug, or they would have never robbed that bank if they didn't have a drug habit. So it's this particular precept that makes it more likely for you to do all these other unwise things like killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, and lying. So it's important to pay attention to this one and really purge any kind of substances that you're taking that are producing heedlessness, and that's going to provide your mind the best environment to be able to move to this enlightened mental state. Okay, so do you guys have any questions on this one? Yeah.
Are we on? We are on. So, in the original teachings, is everything put in words like the top sentence, and kind of leaves the interpretation for next generations and for everything to be compatible with even now 2,500 years after? Or are there more concrete examples even in the teachings? I mean, not only here, but everywhere else. I just wonder. I've come across a lot of this in the content.
Sure. So these are the words of the Buddha up top. Whenever you see the parentheses, that's me helping you to understand what he's talking about. So where he says refrain from strong drink and sloth-producing drugs, the basis for heedlessness. That's what he's talking about here, right? So I put in there substances that cause heedlessness, because he's really applying this to all aspects of any substance. And during his life, it was, drink, that was pretty much the primary one. They had plants and mushrooms and things like that were going on probably during that time too. You don't see him talking too much about that, but you see him talking about wine and liquor and things like this during his lifetime. But if you understand what he's talking about here, and you understand his other teachings where he's teaching you to cultivate the mind, to have mindfulness and awareness of mind, you understand why he's teaching this, because you can't have awareness of mind and promote wholesome qualities in your mind and eliminate unwholesome qualities from your mind when your mind's heedless. This is why, you're more likely to argue or have sexual misconduct or lie when your mind is heedless. So he's teaching you this so that your mind has the best opportunity to be able to get to this enlightened mental state. So we don't have the same substances today that they had back then. So the Buddha's not listing out all these different substances. He's just giving you a teaching that you can apply throughout all time. And I don't think of it as you're interpreting his teachings, because to me, it's very clear cut. Like when I look at these substances, I know exactly when it would be wise to do one thing versus another, but it took me a lot of time to figure this out and be able to see the natural law of Kamma for myself. Because whenever you're causing harm, harm's going to come back. And when you're not causing harm, you're going to experience wholesome results. So that's why, like the example with marijuana, where we put a drop of oil on the tongue of a child and they don't have any seizures for 6 months, we can see that's wholesome Kamma, right? And now when this person over here is ingesting some, brownies with marijuana in it, and they go out and maybe they spend a lot of money and they get to the end of their month and they don't have money to be able to afford their rent, we can see, that was heedlessness. And now this person is experiencing unwholesome results because of this, right? So you can see the natural law of Kamma. But so all these things that I'm talking about, like I've done all these things. That's how I know this natural law, and not just these, but some of the others that I was talking about. Like there's only probably 4 things in the book that I have never done, right? I've never killed a human being. I've never had sex with animals, never done that. I've never raped anybody. I've never had sex with someone of the same gender, right? Those are kind of the only 4 things that I haven't done. But everything else in this book, I've done. That's why it's so thick, right? And that's how I learned the natural law of Kamma. And that's why we have 13 books, right? Because I can explain to you exactly what's going to happen in each one of these situations. So that's where I don't think of it as interpretation. I know the truth of exactly what decisions are going to lead to what results. And then that's where you need to be able to see that truth yourself, and don't believe me, but learn it, examine it, investigate it, reflect on it to verify it, and then practice it to be able to see the truth. I'm just here to explain it to you. And now you've got to do the work to be able to see that wisdom and the truth for yourself. It's on.
So for example, the concentrated THC used for last stages of cancer to relieve the pain is also can be treated as okay. In that case, it might be like this help from natural plant that can help in certain edge cases. Right?
Yeah, and that's where each situation is unique, and that's why my role isn't to tell anybody what they should or shouldn't do. I'm just showing the natural law, and then everybody makes their own choices. So if someone is in their last stages of cancer, they've got 2 or 3 months to live, and they choose to use some marijuana in order to help them with the pain, that's a choice for them to make. If it was me, at this stage of my life, I wouldn't do that. But that's not to say what I'm doing is right and what they're doing is wrong. It's not about that. It's about each individual person making the decision that's best for them in that situation. And for that person, if they choose to make that decision, then that's their choice. And now their mind's going to have that heedlessness for those couple of months as they're ending life. But maybe that's what they need to do in order to really get through this life and get to the next one, perhaps.
Got it. Thank you.
You're welcome. Yep.
What is the difference between using CBD for seizure patients or for children, or and using ADHD medication for kids? If it provides the same, if the report from the child or from the adult that it's making a big difference in their life, and a positive difference.
Sure. So what we're referring to as ADHD, this is just a lack of concentration in the mind. That's the symptom that's being experienced, in the overactivity or the hyperactivity or the lack of attention. And that doesn't get solved through a medication. A medication can create an environment where the mind has a little bit more concentration, but if you take away that medication, or that medication isn't as potent anymore, now the mind still has the lack of concentration. That can be solved through training of the mind. If an individual trains the mind, they can get to concentration. Where this person who has seizures, this is something that is biological, and the brain is not performing as it needs to. And now introducing the CBD oil allows the brain to do what it needs to do. Where this problem over here, the lack of concentration, is not a problem with the brain. it's an issue in the mind, that the mind is untrained. And now when you train the mind, you'll actually get to a real permanent solution where the mind can actually be focused and concentrated without the medication. But whether someone does that or not, it's their choice. If they're looking for a permanent solution, I would recommend training of the mind. But somebody might choose to take medication for a period of time to be able to get them up to a certain level of stability. Now they train their mind, and now they see the stability in the mind, and they start letting go of the medication. And now their mind is supported with this improved concentration because they now trained their mind. And this is where it's not always black and white. It's not like this is all good and this is all bad. It's okay, well, let's figure out what we need to do here. The ultimate goal is to get some more concentration. And if that means we need to have a little bit of medication for a while in this limited period of time, then great. And now let's train the mind and get the mind nice and stable. And now we can phase away the medication. And now we've got this mind that's performing optimally because it's been trained. And that would be my advice to somebody. Okay, let me just check online one more time. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions anywhere else. So this is a very meaty topic. You know, classes don't always go to this point in time. Usually we finish up around 10:30, 10:45, sometimes at the very latest 11. But today, you know, it went a little bit longer, so I just continued to teach and answer y'all's questions. So thank you all for your questions. Thank you for your interest in learning and practicing the teachings of the Buddha. As you guys would like to learn more, you're more than welcome to do that. All of our resources are available for you at no cost. You can get these books at no cost by just downloading them from our website. You can take them and go print them if you'd like. You can get printed versions here at the temple by just reimbursing us for our printing costs, or you can get them on Amazon by ordering them through Amazon if your country has access to Amazon. I suggest that people start with the first book and they work through this particular program of the group learning program. But we also have courses and retreats at other times. Like tomorrow, we have a Foundation in the Path to Enlightenment course starting. It's Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. And you can come for the entire course if you'd like, or you can just come for portions of it. It's up to you. People come and go throughout that course all throughout the week. But if you're here at 9 a.m. tomorrow, we're going to be starting that course where I'm going to give you a really good, strong amount of information, a solid amount of information that's going to help you to really get started on the path to enlightenment. So that starts tomorrow at 9 a.m. So we have all these different options for you to learn, and you can find them either on the bulletin board over there. You can see the options, or you can look on our website at buddhadailywisdom.com. You'll see all the different options. You can even get personal guidance with me where we can sit down in person or online through Zoom, and I can help you, because as you travel, you might need guidance at different times. So that's why I live stream our classes, and I have the ability for you to be able to meet with me either in person or online, because you're going to need that guidance and that support and that help. So if you guys are interested in eliminating your anger and your sadness and frustration and all these other discontent feelings, there's help for you here to be able to do that. And I'm motivated to help you, and everything's available at no cost. So if you'd like to receive that help, you're more than welcome to reach out, and I'm here to help you. So whatever you choose to do in your day, have a very wonderful and lovely rest of your day, and we'll see you next time. Sawadee Kap. Sawadee Kap.
Thank you again for watching. Enjoy your meditation. Look forward to seeing you online and answering any questions that you might have. Thank you so much.